Thank you. So, first thing we have to acknowledge is that you are sexy. Yeah, I mean, it's
Tell that
just
to my wife.
okay. It's just exploding
Lynn,
off the stage.
Stand up a little bit. Stand up, please.
So, to know a little bit about you is to
Where
walk.
did sexy come from? From you.
Kelly.
I mean, from you, sexy.
Kelly referred to you as a sex symbol, or,
Yes.
and I have to agree with her. So I just wanted to get that out there.
A 9 feet tall black guy tells me I'm sexy.
Yeah. Right? This is about truth. Right? So, in your long and incredibly accomplished life, I am going to focus on about 4 or 5 years of that time. And I'm going to focus probably on about 3 shows. And let's take the mystery out of it right now. I want to talk about black people. Right? So we're going to talk about some black people. And I'm also going to be interested to hear how your artistry connects to some of our contemporary experiences.
I thought that's what you're going to tell me.
Well, then you better start asking some questions. Because, so you said at one point that you brought comedy to reality, and that reality included black people. Why was this important to you?
Well, I didn't bring comedy to reality. Comedy exists in reality. I just found it in reality. I mean, I was 9 years old when my father went to prison. When my father went to prison, my mother decided she couldn't live where she was. She was selling all the furniture. The night she was selling my father's red leather chair, from which he controlled the dial just the way Archie, but it was radio, Atwater Kent, the way Archie did the television show. That night that she was selling, as she was selling the chair, some asshole, older guy, puts his hand on my shoulder and tells me, "Norman, you're the man of the house now." Now, if I didn't understand the foolishness of the human condition, I mean, what a fool. A moment later, he's saying, there, a man in the house doesn't cry. So, I'm standing at a funeral of the mother of a close friend, and her daughter is standing in front of me scratching her ass. There's funny everywhere. You can't, if your eyes are open, you can't miss it. When my father went to prison, I'm going to get to the question, me and
please note, you don't have to get to my question.
I want
Just go. Do what you do.
My father, before he went away, we made a crystal radio set. On that crystal radio set, when he was gone, I found or heard or learned of Father Coughlin, hated Jews. I learned for the first time that I was hated by people because I was born to Jewish parents. I learned sometime after that people who were hated even more were black people. I used to go to New York. My folks let me go to New York when I was 16 or 15 or whatever, to see a Broadway show on a Saturday and come back. Sliding into 125th Street as a kid, you could feel, I could almost reach out and touch the tenements. It's the way I felt. Almost all black families. I related to those families. I wondered, as Edith Bunker later did in her show, where that woman, you know, in what drawer did she keep her prize, whatever her prize was, you know. I wondered about those people, and had an affiliation with people who were getting it a lot worse, treated a lot worse than I, because I was Jewish, but a relationship developed there. And I didn't think we were doing anything at all special, more than paying attention to our lives and our kids and our environment and what was happening up the street, down the street, across the street from each other, when we were picking topics for those shows, or when we then did the Jeffersons and Good Times and so forth.
You once said when you were casting for All in the Family, and specifically for the role of Archie Bunker, who will just give you just a 10 seconds of imagine Mickey Rooney as Archie Bunker. Which, there was a brief conversation, a funny one, where Mickey said, wow, once he heard about what the role was, he said...
Yeah, no, I called his, I was in New York auditioning actors. I might have seen 30 or so actors auditioning for Archie. And then I thought of Rooney, and I knew his manager, I called his manager, and he said, Mickey's right here, he's in the office, why don't you talk to him? I said, no, I'd rather describe this character in person, Archie Bunker. I'm coming out to California in a couple of days. Can we arrange to meet? No, and I heard Rooney in the background. I never met Mickey Rooney. And he wants to talk, you have to talk to him. All right, Red, put him on. So, now Rooney talked of himself in the third person. He said, oh, you got the Mick. I said, look, Mickey, I'm coming out to California in a couple of days. Can we meet? Can I tell you about this guy in person? He said, no, you got something for the Mickey, you tell him now. I said, okay. He's a bigot. He will use the words spade and heeb and spick and Norm, he said, listen to the Mick. They're gonna kill you dead. They're gonna kill you in the streets. Now this I gotta remember, because he said, you wanna do a show for the Mick? Listen to this. Vietnam vet, no, private eye, Vietnam vet, blind, Vietnam vet, blind, private eye, large dog.
So it wasn't Mickey Rooney.
It wasn't Mickey Rooney.
Right.
Carol O'Connor walked into my office, read half a page, and you know, when you write something, I don't know what I imagined Archie Bunker would sound like, be like, look like. But of course how could I imagine Carol O'Connor in the role, or anybody? So when an actor puts on your words and gives them life, I don't have the words to describe, you know, how grateful I am to him for what he brought to it.
You said something interesting about Carol O'Connor in particular. You said you liked his face.
Yeah.
Why was that important?
God, these are good questions. I liked his face so much that the biggest fight we ever had over an episode, because he didn't like the writing much, and we used to fight all the time about all of that. But then he would slip in, and sometimes, of course, he was right, and the changes that were made. But for a large part, he was afraid, or I don't know what troubled him. But the biggest fight we had was over a show called The Elevator Story. It took place with only 4 people in an elevator the entire show, but for the very beginning. And he was waiting for an elevator, on a very high floor. The elevator stopped, and there was one black dude, I'm trying to remember the name of the actor, glorious actor, who was carrying a copy of the New York Times. Archie had a copy of the Daily News. So that was the first little thing that went on between the two of them. Archie walked in, just the two of them, and the elevator went down to another floor, and the door opened, and Hector Elizondo, one of the great actors, and a woman playing his wife entered the elevator. And she had just visited her doctor. She was due to have a baby in about 3 weeks. And the elevator went down a few floors and stopped, stuck. The woman was frightened, and it caused her to give birth. So Archie reads the script in which a baby is going to be born. The camera was not going to go down to watch the woman have the baby. It was going to be on his face. And he would have no part of it. And we went through managers and agents and the network and everything else. He was going to quit. I was going to quit. I mean, and then he realized he had to do this, and he slipped in, as he always did, into the character, and there was no Carol O'Connor. This was Archie Bunker. And you heard the baby cry, and the camera's on his face. And, you know, golden. And he won an Emmy for it. So that was that story.
All in the Family, Sanford and Son comes. Maud's housekeeper, Esther Roll, who becomes Florida mom on Good Times. And Good Times, he had some issues with Good Times. The first full black family on television.
That's when I started to hate black people.
It was at that point. It was at that point. Because they tried you. They tried you. They tried you. And you say that both Esther Roll and John Amos, who was the father, they felt that they were bearing the responsibility for all black lives through how they were depicted on the show.
Well, they had an enormous responsibility. They felt an enormous responsibility. Indeed, of course, they had when they were the first African-American parents and citizens and on television and with children. And that was a heavy responsibility. But then the human of the species will sometimes get more frightened than they have any reason to be frightened. In any event, or take that sense of responsibility to an outrageous place where the whole world is on your shoulders or something. So Esther, I thought, you're only hearing my opinion, thought she went a little too far. And her sense of responsibility, a perfect example of it, she had a daughter who was as pretty a woman as ever graced a television tube of any color. And she was 16, and guys were hitting on her, and we wanted to do a story about somebody that she liked that was hitting on her, and would she, wouldn't she, and so forth. And we never intended that she would. But just playing with the idea troubled Esther in her sense of responsibility and so forth. So we reached a point where I had to sit down with them and say, look, when it comes to the patina, what we need to learn, those of us who write, we had several black writers too, you know, you lead. But when it comes to things that deal with a parent, a father, a son, a brother, an uncle, a cousin, I'm all of that too. And I'm going to have to make those decisions whether our skin colors are the same or not. And I'm making this decision. We did that show. There wasn't one state that seceded from the Union. It went well. And so we had those difficulties, but they were glorious actors. All I could do was kiss their feet.
So there's so many layers that I would like to go, and time doesn't permit.
But I love what you're doing too. Now you're helping young people fill out their silhouettes.
You're really kind to even point that out.
But the little I've read is just glorious. What you are up to.
Thank you very much. You're tripping me up. Thank you. Says a whole lot about you that you're taking the time to acknowledge that work. That means a whole lot. Thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome. You know, my bumper sticker reads, "Just another version of you." And it has read for some years. And that's the film they made, The American Masters. They took my bumper sticker and called it, you know, Norman Lear, "Just another version of you." So we're versions of one another. That's all. And I love what you're doing.
I don't know that I've ever been paid a higher compliment, Norman. Thank you very much. So let's advance in time.
Okay.
One of the statements you made upon reflecting on what impact you thought All in the Family might have had and your other shows. And at one point, right, so let's understand this, at the end of the 1974-75, the Nielsen ratings that came out, All in the Family, Sanford and Son, and The Jeffersons were in the top 5, 3 out of the top 5. Good Times and Maude filled out the top 10. So you had 5 shows in the top 10 that were being aired. So let's be clear about the impact. You said that if 2,000 years of Judeo-Christian ethic didn't eradicate bigotry and intolerance, you didn't think that a half-an-hour sitcom would. Are we...
The way I put it, and I'll put it again because I believe it, given 2,000 years of the Judeo-Christian ethic and the problems existing exactly the way they've always existed, wouldn't I be some kind of a fool to think my half-hour comedy made a difference? 2,000 years of the Judeo-Christian ethic, and I'm going to measure my little half hour against it? No.
So when it comes to bigotry and intolerance, are we somehow are we being delusional that somehow we are going to eradicate these things? Or should we resign ourselves to some notion that these are just part of the human condition, and that we're better served by trying to deal with them rather than by trying to eradicate them?
We're better served by trying to deal with them, but we're better served by opening up conversation about them, by really talking about who we are as human beings. I love the notion that we have, because I see it as reality, we are versions of one another, whatever the hell our skin color, the height, the smallness, heavy, light. We're versions of one another. I believe that so deeply. And, but we don't really talk about it enough. You know, we don't even talk enough about, the debate is tomorrow night. We haven't had a real conversation about Donald Trump. I said the name. You know, I have thought about him. I have to back up a little. Somebody once said that nobody ever lost money underestimating the intelligence of the American people. And I've always thought that was, you know, a wag and a wit and bullshit. We're not the best educated. There is a statistic on that. We might have heard it earlier today. I don't know. But we're wise of heart. The American people are wise of heart. They are poorly led in every direction, I see, poorly led. Whether it's pharmaceuticals we've been reading about, or automobile bags, or the bags or the cars themselves, or banking, which God knows we've heard a lot about recently. We're not well led, and we're desperate for leadership. So I've thought when Donald Trump came along, that he represented the middle finger of the American right hand. And it was the American people saying, this is the kind of leadership you give us in every direction, take this. And I think too many people have fallen in that direction, and they're trying to say something with their, you know, I can't bear the thought that might happen, but they're trying to tell the establishment something when they cause me to think that could be our next president.
So when you conceived, well, All in the Family was based on a popular British sitcom that you had seen, thought it would play well in America. You were clearly right. But it seems to me that the culprit around bigotry and intolerance was pretty clear, and you captured it in a television character. Ignorance, bombastic language, long list. It seems to me that today it's much more nebulous. It's much more difficult to put our finger on where these attitudes are emanating from. So many of us who may possess them find ways to deny that we possess them, yet somehow it feels like so much of by which you were confronted 40 plus years ago still hampers us today.
Because
how do we identify it in a way that seems much more subtle and much more complex than Archie Bunker?
we got to face the complexity of being a human being. My mind goes to 35 times, I flew 52 missions, 35 times. I was a radio operator, I had the Top Gun. And I used to look over, my proximity was closest to the bomb bay doors. So I was the guy who looked over or stood up and looked over to see our bombs dropping out of our plane so I could notify the pilot It was the last bomb has left the bay, you could close the doors. So all those times I saw our bombs fall out of our plane and then gather with the tens and 20s or hundreds of bombs from all the other planes in the squadron. And I would watch those planes, those bombs drop, and wonder, they don't all hit a target, one of them hits a home and a family. And I thought, screw 'em. I mean, my jaw wants to clench with the anger I felt. Screw 'em. I'm in a plane where there are fighters shooting at us, shells coming up from below. All of this is going on. I hit a family sitting around a table. Screw 'em. Hours later, on the way home or the next day or sometime, I wondered if somebody came to me at that moment with a piece of paper and a pencil and said, Mr. Lear, sign this and you will forever mean that you didn't give a damn whether it hit a family. I mean, I've never been tested, thank God. But I believe to my heart I would never sign that piece of paper, ever. But I haven't been tested. And I don't want to be tested. That I could hold that thought even for an hour or minutes or whatever. I'm a human being. I'm also a human being who's read papers about kids dying with flies in their eyes across the globe all my life. Reading about the terrible situation people are in my own country, in those tenements I was talking about earlier and elsewhere worse. But I'm capable of reading that and taking a light snack before I go to bed and sleeping a full night's sleep. We don't talk enough about our capacities as human beings to suffer evil, to live with evil, and to also and have the potential for transcendence. It's all alive in us, and all of us. And there isn't enough conversation about our common humanity so that we can out of all of that, I can love you.
So I think there are large numbers of us in this tent that could convey to you very vivid memories of sitting with the family, watching your shows. I mean, long before I knew you, I knew of you because your name was the first that would flash as soon as the episode ended. This Norman Lear guy is in my home. For years and years.
But, that name represented an awful lot of people who collaborated.
Of course it did. Preparing for this time with you, I became very well acquainted with the role, the impact your artistry had on me personally. It was entertaining, but one of the things that I was finally, and I'm talking about days ago, I finally got to a place where I realized and could admit to myself how terrified I was of racism. I was afraid of it. Like viscerally, physically, the thought that there were people who didn't like me, didn't like my parents, and because of our skin color and all of the negative attention and energy, I was afraid of it. And your shows gave me comfort. They gave me courage. And in a way that I was not aware of, they gave me conviction to try to do something. I was here 3 years ago, several days after a man, Jonathan Farrell, from Charlotte, North Carolina, was killed by a police officer. His car had run off the road. He went to some homes nearby, knocking on doors. A woman was scared. She called the police. He's unarmed, but minutes later, he was dead. Days ago, Charlotte is in the headlines again. Another black man is lying dead in the streets. The police were looking for someone else, still way more details to emerge from that. But I say that because, Norman, I am scared again. I'm afraid. And I don't know what can get me through that fear to a more productive place. And I'm asking you to help me.
Well, when you're asking me to help you, you're asking everybody. You're asking a culture to help you. And what we have to struggle to do is to understand, you know, I couldn't walk into a room and meet you without thinking, he's black. It's a shame. It's a shame. I don't know, maybe you go through the same thing. You walk in a room to see me, if there's everybody else is African American, you might think, oh, he's white. But I think the only way through that is to understand he's another version of me. I fucking love that. Understanding, because that is the absolute essence of truth. We're versions of one another, whatever our skin color, whatever our... And we ought to find each other interesting for that. Anyway, I'm so touched by what you just said. I mean, and I'm so glad I'm white and Jewish.
Yeah. So there are some limits to my personal transformation. I mean, there's only so much I can do. The self-help industry has not evolved to the point where I can get to that place. After this, you dominated the Nielsen ratings. A TV critic, a social commentarian, made the comment. He said, Norman Lear has a feel for what people want to see before they know they want to see it. Yeah. What do we want to see that we don't know we want to see?
Well, you want to see come January 6th. You want to see a Latino version, a Cuban American version of a show I did years ago called One Day at a Time, with Rita Moreno and Justina Machado. We just finished 13 episodes. And I think it's terrific. And you want to see a show on epics called America Divided, where I and Common and Amy Poehler and Shonda Rhimes and Jesse Williams. Anyway, we each hosted an episode of things that divide America.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
You're a white, Jewish, 99-year-old man.
94, enough is enough.
But I want to hang out with these people.
Well, let's do it.
Okay, then let's do it. Good. Thank you. You heard it. I have witnesses.
Where do you live? Where do you live?
I live in Sarasota, Florida, but I can get to wherever I need to get.
We live in California, sometimes in New York.
Okay, good. So we're connected. I want to say that, you know, I see the accolades that you receive, and just earlier the award that you received is such a fitting and such a well-deserved recognition. The impact that you have had and your work has had and your vision has had is immeasurable. It's immeasurable. And for me to be able to occupy this time with you and to have you share in the ways that you have is absolutely one of the most memorable and most meaningful things to ever occur in my life, and I really appreciate that.
I want you to know, and a lot of people here will appreciate this or remember this. I walked in, we all walk in on the shoulders of others. You know, I walked in on the shoulders of Fred Allen, on the shoulders of Jack Benny, on the shoulders of correspondents. You know, I mean, guys who are writing about politics, I'm blanking out because I'm so emotionally charged myself. Not because I'm 94.
You didn't like me adding 5 years, so you didn't.
But in fact, George Seldes, I was with him at his 99th birthday, George Seldes. I came in on the shoulders of all those people too. And as to how much we all matter, given the size and scope of the Creator's enterprise here, this being a planet among a billion planets, in a universe of which they say there are a billion universes, can you get your fingers close enough to measure the impact or the difference any two of us make or have made in the history of mankind, humankind? You can't get your fingers close enough. We all matter. In the course of our days, you know, if you make somebody laugh or smile or feel good about anything, measure that against Jonas Salk. In the great scheme of things, you can't get your fingers close enough. We all matter.
Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, you're just a joy. Great woman.